The Batman surprisingly didn't show the Waynes' fateful trip down crime alley. I mean, it feels like we've seen Martha's pearls drop to the ground like 15 times now, so why not just continue that trend? But no, the Batman did something infinitely more interesting and teased the history of both the Waynes family and the Arkham family. And boy, does that seem intense. These two families seem to be at the very core of Gotham's origins, so today I'm going to be looking at their past in order to make some guesses about the future of this new Batman franchise. It's going to be a lot of fun, so let's get started. The Wayne name has always meant so much to Gotham City, and it's because the Wayne family has had such an impact overall. Some of them are great, and others, meh. But that's all families, right? Everyone has a crazy uncle or wacky hidden cousin somewhere, right? But the question I've always had was just how in the world did the Waynes earn their massive wealth? Well, it's kind of always been in the family. Dating all the way back to Revolutionary times, there was the very pivotal Charles Wayne, who got into that sweet real estate game and bought huge amounts of land and property for low prices. This proved to be an excellent foundation to start growing the famed Wayne fortune. When he passed away, his two sons, Joshua Wayne and Solomon Wayne, continued to invest and build and do overall great things. Joshua ran a lot of the blooming Wayne businesses, but tragedy struck him down. He worked with his brother Solomon to help free slaves in Gotham, using the intricate cave system below the city to help people escape, but one night, Joshua was taken out by bounty hunters who chased him down in the woods. Bummer. Solomon, who is the great-great-great-great-grandfather of Bruce Wayne, had a bit more luck. He not only was a pretty well-respected judge during the 19th century, but he also was directly responsible for helping design Gotham. He invested a lot of money and hired a very controversial architect by the name of Cyrus Pinckney to put up a lot of different, unique buildings that would go on to give Gotham City its signature Gothic look. Now, this is interesting. Solomon had a very specific reason for wanting Gotham to look like this. His goal was to build a city that would scare a person into doing the right thing. Solomon basically thought that by putting up a ton of scary gargoyles and dark, shadowy places, that it would make Gotham a safer place overall. Yeah, that backfired. Then Solomon's son Alan Wayne would take on the next step of officially making all the different Wayne businesses a corporate company. And that basically ensured that the Waynes would always be power players in Gotham City. Must be nice, right? Now, the Arkhams have it a bit rougher than the Waynes. They're still an influential Gotham family, but they haven't had almost any of the success the Waynes had, and there is a dark history running through their deep family roots. Like, let's go all the way back to the 17th century, where Ezekiel Arkham was one of the founders of a colonial settlement that would eventually go on to become Gotham City. I mean, you don't get any more connected to the history of a city than that, right? But even though Ezekiel was an important figure, he couldn't stop the witchcraft paranoia that was sweeping up that time period. Ezekiel's sister, Amity, was persecuted and burned at the stake for witchcraft. I mean, she actually was a witch that would go on to cast a curse on all the descendants of the families that hurt her, so I guess it wasn't like they were burning a non-witch, but still. And yes, comic books are wide-ranging, and the official canon timeline is sometimes a little tricky to keep in order, but I'm just talking about the general history of these families that we've seen in comics before. So let's jump ahead to probably the most important Arkham there is, Amadeus Arkham, who would go on to found Arkham Asylum. You know, the place that has a revolving door of supervillains? Like, get some better locks, please? But the introduction of Amadeus is incredibly vital to the Arkham name because it highlighted a long history of mental illness that ran through the family line. Amadeus's mother, Elizabeth Arkham, was mentally ill, and Arkham Asylum's inspiration came from Amadeus trying to help his mom. He helped her end her life after she grew worse, and then being the sole owner of her large estate and mansion, he turned it into a facility to help those in need. Though due to some tragic circumstances, Amadeus eventually went insane and got locked up in his own facility. Later in life, when Amadeus's grandnephew Jeremiah took over Arkham Asylum, he too eventually went mad. So yeah, there's a really dark history overall, and the comparisons between the Wayne name and the Arkham name are this yin and yang representation of success and tragedy. Which brings us to Thomas and Martha Wayne. Now, this part is interesting. Robert Pattinson's new Batman movie made it quite clear that Martha's maiden name was Arkham and that she suffered from her own mental illness for years in her younger days, which even led her to spend time as a patient in Arkham Asylum. This, of course, was a major plot point in The Batman. And of course, traditionally, in the comics, Martha Wayne was formerly Martha Kane and had an entirely different backstory. The Kanes were described as another powerful Gotham family who owned basically everything that the Waynes didn't. They were rivals, and it created this kind of star-crossed lovers type of thing between Thomas and Martha, which is kind of sweet. I hope these two violently wealthy rich kids can figure it out and find love. But seriously, their relationship was generally solid. But now, in The Batman, Martha is officially Martha Arkham, and Bruce, along with everyone else, is shocked to hear about the implications that come from something like this. Okay, just for a warning, there are spoilers coming up for The Batman regarding the Waynes and the Arkhams, so just in case you haven't found 3 hours to go sit and watch the movie, then here's your warning that there are spoilers ahead. So you've been warned. Okay, back to the topic. There is a very crucial plot point that hinges on Martha's Arkham history, which was a reporter by the name of Edward Elliot, making everyone's hush senses go off, by the way, being taken out by Falcone, and Thomas Wayne being sort of indirectly responsible. I mean, it's said that Thomas went to Falcone to just ask him to scare Elliot, but of course Falcone ended up taking the reporter's life. And for about 2 seconds, Bruce believed that he did this in order to help his mayoral campaign, but Alfred soon reveals that Thomas didn't care at all for the politics, but rather just wanted to protect his wife because he loved her so much. And that brings up the really vital difference between this version of Thomas Wayne. In the past, he's just presented as this do-gooder philanthropist who's not only a successful businessman, but also a highly skilled and revered surgeon to boot, which is a combination I've always found a bit strange. But what about you? I mean, if I was a billionaire, I'd probably not spend my time being a doctor, but to each his own, I guess. But now in this new version of The Batman, they make it so Thomas was actually running for mayor when he was gunned down. There is actually a comic series in the Earth 1 continuity that tells this exact story, painting Thomas as a mayoral candidate who was gunned down, as well as making Martha more tied to Arkham history rather than the Kane history. I like the general idea of Thomas being a politician and Martha having a bit of a dark history to her, because it makes for a compelling character struggle for Bruce. So what does this all mean for Robert Pattinson's Batman character? Let's move into some speculative territory. First, let's think how this affects Bruce on the inside. Finding out that both his father was a bit of a failed politician with a bad renewal plan and that his mother had mental health problems provides nice, juicy drama for Pattinson. For one, he has to live up to the image and legacy set by his father. I've seen a lot of criticisms of how Bruce Wayne wasn't a big part of this movie, and to that I say, that's the point. The idea is that Bruce in The Batman is so consumed by vengeance and rage that he turns a blind eye to other ways to help his city. This feels like a setup for him to enter the spotlight more in the sequel and define that classic playboy philanthropist vibe Bruce Wayne is known for. Maybe he won't end up running for mayor like his father, but I think he has tough shoes to fill in terms of being a Wayne for the people. But then also, let's check the other side of the family tree. Bruce just found out that Martha has a history with mental illness, and any look through the Arkham lineage points to that being hereditary. This version of The Batman is a bit of an oddball, but will he have a moment where he stops and thinks about his own mental health? I mean, it definitely takes a certain type of person to dress up like a bat and fight crime at night. Anyone who does that should take a step back and think about their mental health.
Well, a guy dresses up like a bat clearly has issues.
Or could a good villain be the catalyst to get Bruce to examine his family history again? The Riddler touched on the idea briefly, but although the trailers made it seem like it, Riddler did not know Batman's secret identity, so Bruce didn't have to examine that too closely. Side note, man, how scared Batman must have been when he's in the interrogation room and Riddler just starts shouting out Bruce Wayne, right? But anyways, maybe the next villain could bring that fight closer to home. Maybe someone like Hush? I think Hush would be difficult to do at this stage. So the reporter that was taken out was named Edward Elliot, and Thomas Elliot is the name of Hush in the comics, which means there's probably a connection. But given that Hush's whole shtick is very similar to Riddler in this film, the question becomes, how do you exactly make a Hush story now and keep it fresh? Maybe Hush should be kept out of it and another villain group could rise up? Court of Owls, perhaps? It seems like out of any villain, the one that fans want to see most for this new Caped Crusader franchise is the Court of Owls. It's a super secret group of extremely wealthy Gothamites who basically influence events and control the city. It's the perfect type of group for this version of Batman to face. It fits well too. As Bruce continues to look into his past as he learns more about his parents, he could stumble upon the rumors of Court of Owls and wonder how such a large group could remain hidden for so long. Then you have a nice parallel between Bruce and the villain villains. As Bruce Wayne struggles to step out of the shadows and use his money and influence for good, the Court of Owls will be doing exactly what Batman was doing in the first film, which is trying to manipulate events without being exposed. But the real reason I'm talking about the Court of Owls is because there's always the plotline where Bruce suspects his parents were part of this group. They aren't normally in the group in the comics, but now that the backstory has Martha being an Arkham and Thomas being a good man who wants to do more for his city, I think the Waynes could be more connected to the Court of Owls than ever before. Although the change from Martha Kane to Martha Arkham is wild, it still doesn't beat the version of Martha from Flashpoint who, in an alternate universe, becomes the Joker. Now that would be a truly fun transformation to see on the big screen, right? Too late to make that happen?